talking about the implications of the fact that these experiential tendencies are within us. The experiential tendency to find some things better and some things worse, to have these special types of experience. The point is, it wouldn't be there unless those of our distant ancestors who were moving in the direction of having these tendencies and the motivations that go with them were more likely to get their DNA into the future than our distant, than their compatriots or contemporaries, part of our emerging species, who did not have them. And that tells us something important. I mean, it tells us if they were having more success getting their DNA into the future, that could be considered a major part of the definition of life serving. More likely to survive as their kind in the future. And so the species becomes what we are. And, if we can keep on going, presumably we'll become something defined in some other ways. But right now, we're creatures that experience some things as better. And that means that the ancestors who experienced those things were more likely to succeed in the evolutionary game, which is basically, let's see who can get their DNA into the future. Those who had that spectrum of experience, those who had that special kind of experience. And I've written another piece I think those are the two most important things because they're evaluative. The spiritual dimension and the moral dimension are evaluative. And right now, we're in a crisis that has to do with good and a battle between good and evil. Right now, we need to embrace the experiential dimensions that connect us with our moral and spiritual passions, so that unlike the secular worldview of the liberal America of the last generation that didn't respond to this dark and evil thing rising on the right, we will be the proper warriors to defend things like the American democracy, like to create a different kind of economic technological system that doesn't endanger the health of the planet, that reorders the international system, and so that people have are in a good shape to live lives in peace. Not going to end with a nuclear holocaust. All those things, things that we will move more toward if we are in touch with our moral and spiritual passions and respond appropriately to what is clearly destructive, degrading of life, everywhere it touches. Today's Republican Party is rather an extraordinary thing in its consistency of making things worse. And there's an ugliness that's visible at almost every turn, whether it's, just to think about the moment. They're going to nominate Donald Trump. That's disgusting. They just scuttled a border deal so that so that nothing could be accomplished that might make people less upset about immigration, and therefore less easily manipulable by Donald Trump. Anyway, we've got something to relate to is a coherent force that consistently works to make things worse, which is a good definition of evil as it's generally been understood. But in any event, both the moral and the spiritual dimensions are important. And they're both accessed. The only way they can even have any reality is in the experiential realm. And it doesn't mean a thing to say something is better and something is worse when there's not a single creature having any experience. What does it matter if a planet blows up? There's nothing for it to matter to. Life and value, and even value to the nth degree, which is how I define the sacred. There is such a thing as the sacred because people have experiences of things, of having value to that degree. What could sacred mean if there is nothing to whom it was sacred? Does it even have is there even a way of conceiving it? But once you've got creatures who have experiences where things do mean and are experienced as being sacred, well, then it makes sense to talk about things being sacred. And you get also to the realm in which you see these coherent forces battling over the human future. And you are impassioned to see that the force of wholeness shall win and people can thrive and that there's peace instead of war and justice instead of injustice and love instead of hate and truthfulness rather than deception, fidelity rather than betrayal, all the dichotomies that are out there. We're engaged in that kind of dichotomy because we're the creatures that stepped across the threshold and became subject to two different evolutionary processes. We had the biological process, which created us. And then when we took that unprecedented step, we launched our human system into a second evolutionary process. I mean, I developed this idea in my book, The Parable of the Tribes, the subtitle of which is The Problem of Power in Social Evolution. So you end up with a certain kind of selective process in the social evolutionary process once civilization gets going because of an unprecedented step out of the order that the first kind of evolution created. And it is also at odds with what that order created in us. And since that's a life-serving order, and the things that got put into us are there because they were life-serving, it's good to feel the moral and spiritual passions because they will tend to direct us in life-serving directions. So those are the most important ones because we're engaged in this great civil war between democracy and fascism. There are other dimensions of our experience that I have found it, if not as consequential, nonetheless very intriguing, with varying levels of success in my own estimation at solving the problem of why did evolution put this into us. One is, the two that are most mysterious to me are, one of them is music. It really seems pretty obvious that as an empirical fact, the love of music is pretty universal in our species. And again, applying the same reasoning process. why would were our, why is it that, as evidently, the ancestors, our ancestors that had um, this way of responding to music or creating music, um, why why were they more successful in getting their DNA into the future than those that didn't? In other words, this whole music thing must have had some impact on um, how things went in various hunting gathering bands or something like that, uh, such that the emerging proclivity toward music somehow uh, made it more likely they'd get their DNA into the future. Somehow, yeah, but how? Um, I don't have a satisfactory answer. I mean, there's some pieces to work with, like uh, uh, I think that something is significant about how um, song and dance seem likely to be sort of at the root of music. Music does seem to bring people together. So, and bringing people together is probably good for the survival of a hunting gathering band of people, of creatures like us. I mean, I don't know how difficult we are, but I can imagine that it can't be taken for granted that human beings will get along just great. Uh, Probably better than we do in this broken world we got here, but I don't know how it would have been, in your average hunting gathering band 15,000 years ago. You know, Uh, was social harmony pretty easy to achieve? Don't know. But I can imagine that there, even if there wasn't a problem of social harmony, that fellow feeling of some who do things for people, there's hunting or or gathering or raising children, that it's helpful. So when I think about say uh, various National Geographic type films with the natives dancing in some rhythmic way, I can imagine that might be advantageous to have for a group to have that as a tool. And then singing is also, I think, is connected with the erotic. Um, the human voice is there at the beginning of music for sure. Um, Drum was also, there. Rhythm is another issue to talk about. But the human voice, um, first of all, feeling is um, something that we tend to have a fair amount of, and it's not always easy not to know what to do with it. I don't know how much that was true in hunting gathering societies. I think it's pretty true in civilized societies. I've been an encounter group leader, and I think there's a lot of censorship in the world. So it might be, nice to have an outlet for music, which is a medium which is much connected with feeling. And then in particular, there's the about the erotic. Um, it doesn't seem like it's a. It seems meaningful that the response of uh, females in the Western world to first the Bobby Soxers and Frank Sinatra, and then Elvis in the 50s, and then the Beatles. There was an enormously powerful thing going on that had a sexual dimension. How much has that got to do with how music got into us? Uh, I envy the people who can really do a good job of making music. And I'm puzzled as to just why it's so wonderful. I mean, if you ask me whose creations do I most admire, uh, the answer would probably be Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. Yeah, I've certainly had I've held him in awe since I was 15 anyway. Not a writer, not a thinker. Mozart's another contender. Just I think how did they do that? How did they manage to have all these musical ideas that are so wonderful and to execute them so brilliantly? But I don't understand why it's so important. It's just saw the Grammys with my wife. First time I've ever seen the Grammys. And it was an extraordinary experience for both my wife and me to see these Grammys. First of all, the music is very different from what we grew up with. Uh, there's the effort to somewhat successful to relate to what's being put out there. But more than that, there was something at the human level that was really quite something. The production numbers were done with great creativity and artistry, and there was a lot of conversation went on that touched on very deep things. And there was a sense that there was a feeling community. I'm left with imagery that I'm still processing. There's a music world out there that's playing some kind of powerful role that I was not clued in on. That you can see when Miley Cyrus performs her Grammy of the Year award in Flowers. I mean, she is out there. The music and the dance, the singing and the words and the meaning. There is something being conveyed here, and with all her movements as well. It's just a very powerful message getting put out there. That's playing a role in this society in some way. There was a number in which a song called Fast Car. I never heard of it. It got performed. I didn't recognize. But there's a white country-looking guy who introduces us to this song, which was composed by a black woman, names again, who's 59 years old and has got really quite an extraordinary person in some way. I don't necessarily understand, but they perform this song together, and it's almost like a moment in human history that's being made. I don't think I'm capturing this well enough. It's got to do with the tribute being paid. Tracy Chapman is her name. And the tribute that's being paid by this young white man to this older black woman who has given the world a lot and suffered a lot and is completely down to earth and hasn't performed this publicly in a very long time. And then there was these camera cutaways to Taylor Swift, this extraordinary phenomenon, which all by herself shows how powerful a thing music is. Now, I'll go back to that question. What role is this playing, and what can we learn from all this? But anyway, Taylor Swift you can see her mouthing the words of other as the other song is being performed by other performers. She seems to know all the words to all the songs. Not sure about Taylor Swift, how exactly I feel about her, but there's a chance that what she's doing as this musician, and she's not exactly. I mean, the Swifties are girls too. It's not like it's the mirror image of Elvis. It's girls relating to Taylor Swift um, in some different important way, which I don't understand. Though I got granddaughters who've gone there. Oh, uh, I her music is not Bach to me, but I have seen what I think is a generosity of spirit in this person. And there was a generosity of spirit in this whole event, this whole Grammys event. It is that what music is? Is it a pathway into the heart? You know, think about, well, what is it? What is it that moves me? Well, actually, there's more than one category. I really love smells. I mean, I'm getting into incense because throughout my younger years, um, a lot of my most filled in the spirit moments have had to do with smelling something like lilacs, like basil. I think I once wrote a line something like, you know, the smell of fresh basil makes it difficult not to believe in God. I wasn't necessarily serious about that, but the smells of spring. I live in a forest. There was a whole sequence of smells, but I'm not as I feel like the life that I'm leading, and maybe partly it's because I'm older, but when I was in my 20s and I lived in Berkeley, California, I would go out walking in the evening. And for several months, there would be this particular tree that would be making the whole place intoxicating. Those are important experiences to me, and I'm getting into incense now, so experience. But anyway, that's another experiential dimension. You know, we are very moved by smells. Uh, to some extent, that's vestigial. I mean, I think way back, the olfactory system was more what we were, or our ancestors were. Whereas these other dimensions, I think, are coming along as human beings and more consciousness develops, the moral and spiritual dimension that arise with civilization, all that stuff. We are connected to the process that made us, and we need to be in a good relationship with the process that made us. We need to be that way for our own fulfillment, and we also have to not be at war with the processes of life on this planet. And when we destabilize the Earth's climate, we are in such a war. So besides music, and there's probably much more to be said, but besides music, which really seems like something important flows along, and however we end up characterizing what it's about, what it does for us. There's a sense of humor, or there's laughter. The laughter is the behavior. The sense of humor is what leads to it. There are some thinker of early in the 20th century that defined our species as the animal that laughs. And I agree, not necessarily that that's how we should think of ourselves, but it's not a trivial thing. One question I've got is whether, like, do chimpanzees have this same capacity to find things funny, to do things to make other people laugh? I mean, did this emerge with our species? Like, since we split with the chimpanzees 5 or 6, 7. I mean, I have a picture of chimpanzees doing something that looks a lot like laughing. So I'm thinking that that uh, human tendency, it may have some specifically human qualities to it. But if whatever those human qualities are, they're built upon, I'm betting, something that emerged before we had the kinds of language and sophisticated thinking and reasoning powers and all this stuff that that can play a role in humor. I don't know that I'm not satisfied with me. One of the things that strikes me about laughter is that it seems to be like it's not just one thing. If it is, I'm not sure I understand how to say what that thing is. But for example, you think about, say, 3 couples around a dining room table having dinner, and there's lots of laughter going around the group on an ongoing basis throughout the meal. I've participated in that kind of thing. I like it. But then laughter isn't always like that. You can picture a group of boys or something like that laughing. Some other uncoordinated boy does something clumsy. Laughter can be cruel. One of the things I enjoy most doing with my wife, April, that's a picture over there. Let me get. We spend a half an hour every evening watching some whatever, including the Grammys, but including some news. But usually it's a movie that we're watching in installments. Anyway, laughing together is one of the best feelings, and it happens regularly when we talk about what we're watching. So, it really does feel like a bonding thing between two people. My best friend from college and I laugh a lot when we do our FaceTime conversations once a week or something like that. It's fun. Humor is fun. And then there's the phenomenon of what speakers understand about giving a speech to a crowd, like a politician talking to a crowd. I think it's widely understood that if you can get people laughing with you at the beginning, they'll be a whole lot more accessible to you when you deliver your more serious message and try to enlist them in whatever. So after dinner speakers are usually start with, besides the thank yous if you're a politician, I usually start with some funny thing, a joke or two. So what is that? There's a kind of opening there. But then what do you do with that cruelty part? And along with that cruelty part, there's I tend to think about laughter as something that's really quite benign. It's a sign of something good. Um, but there is the phenomenon that is used in a whole lot of movies, animated and otherwise, uh, in which there's an evil laugh. Uh, Jabbar in Aladdin or something like that. Uh, I think that there's a scene in which he has this evil laugh. And anyway, I've seen many evil laughter scenes, and um, I wonder, is laughter more than one thing? Um, there's a mockery element to it. Um, I don't. I don't know quite how to think about it. I can see how it could have benefits in terms of bringing people together. Um, it has been said that a comedy should be watched in a group. Um, Whereas, a tragedy is easier to watch alone. I had one of my most enjoyable movie going experiences was watching the Marx Brothers in Duck Soup in a big auditorium consisting of highly stressed Harvard students during exam period. There was just so much laughter in the room, letting off so much of the anxiety that was had as people prepared to get themselves evaluated by a college that they worked hard to get into. It was a lot of fun watching the Marx Brothers as a group. And I don't get those kinds of experiences, but laughter is also contagious, which indicates something about the highly social nature of the thing. Um, which reminds me that there is a quarterly, psychoanalytic quarterly. And in the fall of 1967, I got a hold of an issue. It was fairly current at that time. And there's an article by a guy whose name, why am I gotten so bad at names? It might come to me. Anyway, it was about uh, the, the cross species evidence that behaviors that involve the showing of the teeth um, are contagious. So laughter is one of those. Yawning is also contagious, but laughter, and you can watch baboons, and I don't know exactly what their yawning's about, but it's a big deal. Anyway, laughter is also whatever it is that it does for us. It has made use of the fact that the showing of the teeth tends to become a contagious thing. Oh, that reminds me of another experiential tendency that I've been wondering about lately: revenge. Help me stay on topic here for a minute on this revenge thing. I'm watching the situation in the Middle East, especially Gaza, but there's a lot more going on just Gaza, and there's a lot in that thing that's got to do with striking back and the impulse toward revenge. It seems to have been an irresistible impulse in the heart of Israel in the wake of the extraordinarily ugly, brutal, vicious attack that they had deliberately, as horrific as you could make something, for the purpose of traumatizing a nation. Traumatizing would mean it becomes more difficult to deal with it rationally and constructively. You have the impulse simply to hit back. And that looks like not a great thing. But then, because I have this evolutionary perspective, I think, well, I think I've observed that there is an impulse in us or in people in general, and not just people. I think the impulse, if something hurts you, you strike back. You you grab a strange cat on the street in some aggressive, painful way. You're likely to get attacked. I don't do that sort of thing. Not just because because I love cats, but you know, you you don't want to go asking for trouble because an animal will strike back if you assault it. And I think we people have that impulse. Certainly, a major theme in the literature of human beings, in movies, and all the way back to revenge drama in Spain in the 17th century or whatever it was. I mean, it's a whole thing, and we get set up to want to be able to strike back, and then the narrative gives us a satisfaction. So I'm thinking, if I think about our experiential tendencies, well, it looks like the impulse to hit back has evolved in us. Well, if it's evolved in us, it must have that must have meant that those of our ancestors who had such an impulse were more likely to get their DNA into the future than one that maybe could be attacked and the attacker would pay nothing, no price. I could believe that. So there's a tension there. On the one hand, it seems like we've got an impulse that its being there testifies to the fact that it must have been life-serving to have that impulse. And then we also have what we see in the human world frequently, not just with the Israelis striking back in Gaza in the way that they did, but you can see it like wherever there have been feuding peoples, the McCoys and the Hatfields, and feuds as a whole way of life and country, in little cultural systems without the rule of law. Like I guess I think I remember in Albania and other things in that world where there are codes of honor and there's a never-ending cycle of people taking revenge on each other. Everyone feeling that the other guy hit first. So there's a pathology and there's an adaptiveness. So how do those fit together? Well, another thing about us as a species that I feel that it's worth looking at in this experiential tendencies thing, and that's that we take pleasure in beauty. The subject of beauty has interested me for a long time, and I've tended to read books that I don't know, half dozen books about what is beauty about. I don't know what to say. I don't feel like I ever got deeply satisfied by it. I think it cannot be doubted that people do get pleasure out of looking at beauty. And some people have done analysis of our sense of beauty in terms of sexual attractiveness and how what people find beautiful is correlated with the likelihood of somebody being a good specimen to recruit to be the other contributor of DNA to one's offspring. And I think that that's probably important. It's definitely the case for me that the beauty of a beautiful woman is a special kind of beauty. that moves me quite directly. But there's a lot more to beauty than that. And I think in a previous brief going into this, I talked about the Willie Mays catch in center field in the 1954 World Series. I mean, he made a beautiful catch. And people will say something about somebody, oh, she has a beautiful soul. And they mean something. And then there's a beautiful sunset and a beautiful poem. So, is there something wrong with using the same word to describe all those things? I don't think so. I think that there's something that they have in common. And then there's the question of how do you articulate what it is they have in common. And what I think they have in common is that they are an ideal version of themselves, well ordered, things in the right place, a beautiful flower arrangement, a beautiful bonsai, a beautiful sonata, perfectly ordered. That's a lot of what art does in its quest to be beautiful, to find the ideal way of putting it together. That's what a Bach Brandenburg, sounds like to me. A beautiful idea. In some way, just the way an idea should be. And then I think about, well, maybe there's a way of explaining why we would want to take pleasure, why we would want to take pleasure in something which represents some kind of an ideal. And what occurs to me is that we human beings have a special need to be motivated to steer onto the road that's the path toward things happening the way they should happen. Because as cultural animals, we have a bigger range of where we might go. Animals, to the extent they're ruled by instinct, don't have to make good choices. They just do what comes naturally. But the more we end up with culture, the more we have something which hasn't already been written down in our genes. And therefore, we have a much wider range of going, and we could take some really wrong turns. So it's good to we don't want to go in the direction of, like you think of this as It's a Wonderful Life, the famous Christmas time movie where there's a vision, where there's this real world that we were first introduced to, which is Bedford Falls, which is a great American small town, which has got its problems, but basically it's the way we Americans want to think of ourselves. And then there's where the angel takes the Jimmy Stewart character and shows him around. This is the way the world would be if you'd never been born. And it is so dark and so mean-spirited. I'm told that I should restart, so I will come back.